Good morning. I'm here to talk about an organization which is not quite an NGO, but which is a group of friends, academics, who have gathered together to create a panel. And our topic is social progress for this century. What are the perspectives of improving society and tackling social injustice? You know, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change has found the need for a panel, which has become the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is very famous. They have done 5 reports already. What about social change? Climate change, of course, is a serious issue, but social change is also a serious issue, and actually policymakers do care about that as well. We've been talking here about the Sustainable Development Goals, so the UN is making a big effort, and really there is a big momentum around that. Somehow nobody found the need to create a panel on that. And so we said, why not mandate ourselves and create this panel and see if we can get some interest in these issues. And so what we are doing is essentially trying to be a platform for sharing social science with the public who may be interested, with people who may take some of these ideas. Because social science has improved a lot in the last decades, since the last war in particular. A lot has been done. And we often feel that the public debate is not up to the state-of-the-art knowledge on these issues. And so there is a need for sharing that. Some of our members actually have also felt the need to create offshoots of that, so other platforms on more specific issues. So you have one now that's being created on family issues, and one that has been also created on violence. We are not thinking, so we are not an intergovernmental panel, and we are not talking only to governments, because we think that, especially in the long run, change comes from grassroots initiatives, from society. And the policymakers, they do the best they can, but very often they have more short-term interest, they have political imperatives, and they do not necessarily take the initiative to change things. They somehow accept things that have been changed, and they formalize them, but they don't really take the initiative. So the initiatives has to come from civil society, and that's why I'm here to talk to you about this, and because you are both on the business side and the NGO side, you are really some of the important change makers in the long run. And so our goal in talking with you is to provide some material that could be useful, some arguments, ideas that could be useful when you work for your causes. But also we would like to benefit from your feedback and benefit from your experience of what happens on the ground. We really are eager to collect your feedback. And we have a report, a big report that's now in press with Cambridge University Press. We also have forums. So on our website, you can actually consult all the drafts of the report and all that. So a lot of material is already available and will soon be in print, but you can already find a lot on this. So we are very eager to hear you, and I'm happy to be here to connect more with you. So I won't disclose the details of the report because I don't have the time, but I will just give you a rough idea of the vision that we have in our work. So if you look back at the past centuries, it's amazing how much progress has been done. For millennia, humanity was really at subsistence level, and suddenly with innovation, with better institutions, in the last 2-3 centuries, we have somehow exploded, reached a new level. And this curve that I've drawn here is a curve that looks very much like the graphs that represent GDP per capita over millennia, right? So it's really like a flat thing until we somehow jump to another level. But now we are facing a serious challenge, which can be described as a crossroads or as a chasm, because we are really facing serious threats. So there are two elements, two dimensions of threats. One is the environmental challenge, the environmental threat. Climate change is one, but it's not the only one. Environmental degradation is happening on many fronts, and biodiversity is also a very, very serious issue. So that's one thing that can even threaten our mere survival if certain tipping points may be reached. But there is another threat which is also very serious, which has to do with gaps between people, with inequalities, and with separations between groups and communities. And this because, of course, a lot has been achieved, especially now we have emerging countries catching up the developed economies, so that's very good. But there are also peoples and countries that are left behind. And that's a very, very serious issue. If we don't tackle that very quickly, we run into a very serious problem. Conflicts will follow from too wide disparities between people, but also migrations, which destabilize both the sender regions and the receiver regions, right, as you know. So we have to somehow address the sustainability issue and the equity issue at the same time, which is not obvious. As you may have heard some years ago, the American way of life is not negotiable. Well, it has to be negotiable at some point because it's impossible for all the planet to adopt it, right? So we need to change things. We need to propose new ways of life to the people who want to catch up. And so that's the challenge of achieving sustainability and equity at the same time. And there is a third dimension here which is very important, which is democracy. So democracy is also threatened by the difficulties, the social disruptions that come from serious hardships coming from technological change, for instance, and globalization. And so we have to imagine tackling the challenges not in an authoritarian way, but in a way that empowers people, that puts them in the driving seat, and that deepens our democracy. And so that's the condition. So making progress on these three fronts is the only way we can really bridge this chasm and go on the other side where the summits are even higher. So in our report, we really want to go against the idea that there is no alternative. Margaret Thatcher is famous or infamous for having said that. But we really want to push the idea that there are alternatives, and in fact there are many alternatives. There are many possibilities that can be both implemented at the policy level, so you can rethink the safety net, and now people are thinking of a combination of income safety nets, but also capital guarantees and employment guarantees, and a combination of all this can be important to secure people's situation and make them more able to be engaged with market activities and with the economy. We can imagine a new welfare state with new sources of tax revenue, because the sustainability issue is a challenge, but it's also a new opportunity, because we can use green taxes to get new sources of revenue that can help address social issues, and that can help also the fiscal difficulties of governments who are under stress, especially with a globalized economy. And we can invent new things in the political system. So the well-established democracies are actually shaking sometimes, even in this country. People are afraid that things are not as robust as they thought. And so we can imagine new rules that really improve things, new rules for funding political activities, new rules for voting systems. And the governance of the media is a very, very serious issue. So it's very important to think of the media system as a sort of commons, as public good that has to be governed in a democratic way to maintain its independence, both from state control and from commercial interest. But these are policy ideas, but there are many things that can, as I said, that can be implemented, initiated by civil society. And civil society can really do a lot in terms of pushing participation. And participation is really a key aspect of the empowerment of people. And there are many initiatives, especially we've heard about corporate social responsibility. One key aspect, it's not just about the environment and all that. One key, you have businesses which really innovate in the internal governance of the relation with the employees. So empowering the people who work in the organization to make it really democratic. That's possible, and when you do that, it's actually more productive because people are more engaged, there is greater trust in the organization, information flows better, and you get higher productivity and more flexibility from the workforce because they are really engaged for themselves as partners and not just as subordinated employees. Another dimension where a lot of things can be done, and I have to be short, but is really about information. Transparency is something, so leaks are not very popular in this, the government of this country, but information transparency is something that is playing a big role. So it's not exactly as powerful as power, but it's almost there. It's a first step in being powerful. Having the information and making this information circulate is very important. And finally, you have new ideas now that come up in communities and also in businesses to really have social purposes in the activities and to revive the sense of togetherness, of living together. Social entrepreneurship and so on, B corporations, benefit corporations and so on. Many things are happening that are very interesting and enlarge the purpose of the organization. And finally, you can even think of system-wide vision. So we are not stuck with the old ideologies, capitalism, socialism and all that. That's old-fashioned. Now we have to think in terms of course, we have to think of keeping the market as a key element of our economy, but we can combine that with institutions that make it human-friendly and that can empower people. So there are especially two sort of visions that we discuss in the report. One is well known, it has been tested, social democracy. There are very good ideas that have been tested in Scandinavia. People say, oh, but Scandinavia, you cannot implement, export these ideas in other countries. Well, it's not quite true. You can actually do a lot, borrow a lot of ideas, and we have discussions about how you could do, for instance, a lot of that in Latin America. The eco-democracy is something we are still looking for a label for that. The idea is something that is more, so social democracy is a bit like a sort of centralized system where the state and unions and so on play a big role in a central bargaining system. Whereas the eco-democracy idea is really you decentralize all of that and you have democracy in all organizations. So as I said, businesses can be democratic and so on. And when you have democracy at all levels, then you have a lot less inequality, a lot less social problems, a lot less need for state intervention, right? Because things are happening in a better way on the ground. And so let me close with this, coming back to this idea that really social progress has to be a bottom-up process. It's not just a top-down. Of course, we shouldn't shy away from politics. Politics is important at some point because you have to enshrine the new trends in real institutions. Otherwise, things don't really get stabilized. But nevertheless, really a lot has to come from civil society. I mentioned I'm sorry for the slide, which has changed a little bit since last time, but the role of information and transparency and accountability I already mentioned. The last thing I wanted to say is, especially to the NGOs, there is this old say, think global, act local, which comes from city planning, but has been borrowed from by many other parts of social activities. It's no longer sufficient because now the many problems are global and many actors are global as well, and especially on the business side, you really have a lot of global actors. So we need to have, on the civil society side, NGOs, we need to have global action as well. So networking globally may be very important in order to scale up the power of your action. So that's one of the key advice that we want to propose for NGOs and even for communities which can connect now with new technologies. It is so easy. So thank you very much. I don't want to